Ubers. So I did a rant video previously about whenever I was driving for Uber, and I didn't expect that anybody would actually care about it. It was just me venting. But it turns out there were quite a few people who had questions about my experience through the DPU process whenever I posted this to the subreddit, so I'm going to go ahead and make a follow-up video for you guys specifically. So consider this a part 2 on whether or not it is worth it driving for Uber. So if you're here just for the DPU process experience, go ahead and go to this timestamp that I'm putting here right now. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and just continue on from the first video because my God, this gets interesting. And if you missed the first video, I'm putting a link down in the description. So to catch you up, if you missed the first video and just don't feel like going and seeing it, I got deactivated by Uber 2 different times, one in DC and one in Massachusetts. In DC, I had no recourse, but they activated me again after 9 months. In Massachusetts, however, I did not know that they submit this information to the state. So a few weeks after I made the last video, I get this letter saying, hey, we're taking away your rideshare certification, so you can't even drive for Lyft anymore. And naturally, I'm like, what the hell? Because it's one thing for Uber to just, drop me, right? And then ruin my livelihood with them, but for them to ruin my livelihood as a rideshare driver entirely is a new ball game for me. I was speechless, especially since I had no idea why I was being deactivated anyway, right? I assumed, as I did in the previous video, that it was customer complaints, just people making up stuff for refunds. And I was right about that, but we're gonna get to that in just a moment. Because you have the ability to appeal this decision, which I did immediately. I said, look, I don't know why they even deactivated me. They said customer complaints, and that's all I know. I have not had an opportunity to discuss this with them. They tell me nothing. And as I have shown in the previous episode, I am actually a pretty good driver. I had a 4.94 rating with Uber, and that was after a lot of hard work bringing that rating back up after a significantly bad night on a New Year's Eve. Never drive on New Year's Eve, by the way. So they granted me a hearing, and at that point, I just waited. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know that I needed to consult a lawyer. I just assumed I would talk to somebody, right? About 3 days before the hearing is scheduled, I get a list of exhibits, which include every complaint I have ever gotten from Uber. And while I'd love to show you all of them, I'm not going to do that. There are a few I will show you later on. But there was one in particular that I absolutely lost my mind over, and I will show you right here. It actually said that I called small children the N-word. And when I read that, I absolutely lost my shit. I was very upset and I felt very alone, and it was right about this time that my relationship was not doing too well either, so I wasn't feeling very good in the emotional department. But right about that time, I came across a group called Mass IDG, which is basically a group trying to unionize rideshare drivers. Not necessarily to make them employees in this state, but to give them more rights than they have now, more pay, that kind of thing. And one thing in particular that they offer as a service is to try to get deactivated drivers back on the road. They have a website called IamDeactivated.com. So I went ahead and submitted my information with them, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get anywhere with them myself. They have so many drivers that are more needy than I am, that I guess have been driving for longer than I have. But I was able to communicate with somebody from there, and I've actually done some volunteer work for them myself. I've gone out there and passed out some pamphlets, and I wish I have done more, but unfortunately, as frequent viewers of my channel know, it's been rough here lately for me, especially because of this Uber stuff killing my livelihood, right? So between guidance from them, and I talked to a couple of lawyers, though I never retained one, and just got some general information on what to expect during the hearings. I just asked some questions like, what do you expect I will be asked? And the general answers I received were basically they'll ask you about the complaints that were lodged against you, and you'll just have to answer them. Right? Like, tell your version of the story. Don't be defensive about it. Just tell them, factual information. If you have dash cam footage, that would be helpful. Here's the thing about dash cam footage, and a lot of you drivers know that this is a problem. It's a large file size, and it takes up a lot of space on your computer. So oftentimes we can only keep it for a few days, and there's a lot of drivers who just, assuming that they don't get a complaint in the first few days, just delete it after that, right? And we can't just keep shelling out for SD cards. I mean, it gets really expensive, and I know we can write that stuff off, but why do we want to keep doing that? especially if Uber's not going to like use it anyway if we have this problem, right? So cut to, I get to my hearing, and basically it's this phone conversation where they conduct it like it's a court hearing, but it's on the phone. And more or less, there are 3 specific complaints that were issued, one of which being where I allegedly called a small child the N-word, that were used specifically in the decision to deactivate me from the platform, and I basically had to give my side of the story on that. But it's a little bit trickier than just telling your side of the story. I had my YouTube video to help me out. I actually used that as an exhibit in my particular hearing. But one of the complaints that I received was one guy saying he felt discriminated against because he got in my car without wearing a mask, right? In reality, this guy was giving me a hard time because he still had not put on the mask by the time I'd driven a few blocks, and historically, those kinds of people never put on the mask and then just keep on complaining. And this is at like 12:30 at night. This guy was drunk. I didn't want to deal with him. I just told him to get out. This guy was a white male. I'm a white male. There's nothing I could have discriminated against him for. And he just called me woke and got out of the fucking car. But because he is, I guess, conservative or not woke or whatever the hell he thinks, he felt discriminated against. Interestingly enough, there was another complaint that a customer used that was exactly what I use for almost every customer in these kinds of situations, where I basically tell them, historically, customers like you have always been a problem, where you come in without a mask and then continue to complain about the face mask policy. I would rather just not have you in my car. The fact that she included that language in there almost verbatim, I was able to cite that as specific evidence to combat the complaint that was used against me to deactivate me from the platform. It was almost like poetry. And if Uber had provided me any of that information from the start, we could have, had me back on the road without even using the dash cam footage. We could have had an actual conversation. This is the kind of stuff that you have to look out for whenever you get that list of exhibits. And one thing I recommend you do from the start is when you get that list of exhibits, because they will provide them to you only like 3 days before your hearing. Request to reschedule your hearing so you can get legal counsel. That's what I did. I said whenever I saw those exhibits that I felt that they were severe enough that I needed to at least get a lawyer to look at them. And at that point, they gave me another month to look at them. That extra month, yeah, you're still not on the road, but that extra month is going to help you out because it gives you another month to be able to look at the evidence and find holes in there that you can use in your defense. That's extra time you have. This is all done via email too, so you need to be vigilant about checking your email as well. And once that hearing is done, it's going to take them 90 days to make a determination, and they will use every one of those 90 days. When they tell you it takes up to something, they use every one of those days. Just be prepared. But at the end, assuming that you have gone through all of this and you didn't manage to say something incriminating, which by the way, hire a lawyer if you could afford it. I could not afford it. That's why I did it myself. They send you this nice letter telling you that they reversed the determination and that you can now go be a rideshare driver again. So now that the state of Massachusetts has basically looked at this evidence and said, okay, we're not buying this. This guy is obviously not going to try to be a racist to people, and we don't consider this a problem. This is considered libelous content, and I can now sue Uber. The problem is, there's not a lawyer that wants to take this case at the moment because the main Uber lawyer for this area is running for Attorney General. And despite my many attempts over the last months to try to contact their office, I've never once gotten a call back. So I have literally had to go through the Massachusetts Bar Association, the Boston Bar Association, and nobody wants the case. The problem is, it's because Uber's such a fucking big company, none of these lawyers want to fucking take them on. That's the only reason. And that's where Mass IDG comes in. Because Mass IDG has already managed to take on Uber in New York and gotten higher wages for their drivers in New York. They have better conditions over there. They get their drivers often reactivated whenever they're deactivated. Not 100% of the time, but hey, definitely better results than what I'm getting right now with them. And what's more, you can still get all of that without being classified as an employee. I know that there's a lot of drivers out there who would like to be classified as employees, and there's a lot of drivers who don't, that still like to be classified as independent contractors. You can still get better rights and still be an independent contractor. You're getting the best of both worlds in this case. So if you've not checked out the Mass IDG website by now, I highly recommend that you go check this out. This is a great time to be talking about this because in a future election, there's a ballot question on whether or not you basically want to keep the status quo for delivery drivers and rideshare drivers. Companies like Uber want you to vote for this. You don't want to vote for this. So be sure that you check out the Mass IDG website for more information. So that being said, this is where we end up here in my particular little universe. I can go drive for Lyft now if I really want to. I don't really want to, but I could go do it if I really wanted to. Uber is telling me to go fuck myself still. I need to find a lawyer. If there is a lawyer out there willing to take my case, please put a comment, send me a direct message. I'm reachable, please. And check out the Mass IDG website. I cannot stress that enough. Please do that. And with that, I can't really say much else. I wish I could, but because I am going to be suing Uber, there's only so much that I can actually put in this video. I probably already said too much. But specifically for the DPU appeals people, I wanted to put something out there because I believe in helping people, and I really wanted to put something out there so you at least had an idea of what to expect. I highly recommend, if you can afford the $1,000 to get a lawyer to just help you talk your way through that appeal, you should. I was pretty fortunate that the complaints that were against me were pretty friggin' outrageous, so your mileage may vary. And with that, I hope that this has at least been somewhat helpful for you. Hit that subscribe button. I wish you the best of luck.